Welcome, old friends, new friends. So good to see you all. People at the TSC Summit get to see a part of me that my friends, my family, my other work colleagues at the university never see of me. And that's the one day a year that I wear a suit coat. So flash those pictures now because you're not seeing this until next year for our 10th anniversary. So I'm the geek that gets to talk about data, and how fun is that? As those of you familiar with TSC, our impact report is the report that we produce each year that talks about both the results that we've seen from the Sustainability Index as well as all the other projects that are ongoing in the consortium now. And so we have really wonderful news, as Ewan alluded to, in that we're able to now have 3 years of very solid data and have an understanding of kind of what data is tied to which supplier, anonymously, but nevertheless, we can see particular supplier named ABCD and their move in their scores and their KPI responses over now a 3-year period. And so as a statistician, this excites me to no end. So let's take a look at some of the data, and as the year goes on, we'll be releasing the impact report online, and you'll see a deeper dive on these data. At a supplier level, the average score for the 2017 index was 36. Last year it was 32, so this represents an 8% increase in the average score. That's quite significant. And really the story here is about increasing transparency. So while transparency is a buzzword that we hear in the sustainability world and in supply chains in general, this is solid data that increasing transparency is occurring. As Ewan mentioned, these data represent $200 billion worth of sales through Walmart and Sam's Club. If we think about the fact that the manufacturers making these products also sell to other retailers, with very conservative estimates, this is representing at least $500 billion of economic activity in the world. So quite a significant impact. And there were about 1,700 suppliers that replied to the index in the past year. And again, an 8% increase. And since most of our KPIs deal with supply chain transparency, that's really the big story behind the improvement in performance that we see. What were the highest scoring categories in 2017? Well, compared to 2016, we see some repeat categories that were also on top in 2016, namely computers and household paper products. We also see now copy and printer paper and feminine nursing hygiene products. These categories all scored above 60 on average and had at least 5 different suppliers responding. But you also see on the left that there's a large number of food categories, all representing what you might call generally specialty crops, that also bumped above that 60 score. They weren't there last year, and I think that if we'll put together a more cohesive story as time goes on here in the impact report, but kind of our initial assessment is that there have been historical forces, regulatory forces, certification capabilities, for example, in paper and pulp, that have led to increased transparency of supply chain operations in many of these categories. For the specialty crops can be identified more easily than commodity crops, and so it's not necessarily operationally surprising that they've been able to achieve across the board, across many different categories, specialty crops, an increased score here around basically knowing what's happening on the farm. So very positive news there. And congratulations to the producers in these categories who have really stepped up their level of visibility into their supply chains. We asked those who took training from TSC, since we had their contact information, we were able to contact them and ask them, did you do anything to increase your score? We didn't ask, did you do anything to improve your sustainability? We went right to the heart of the matter. Is our theory of change working? Are you doing things to change your operations, to change your supply chain, to increase your KPI score? 88% said yes, we have done something in the past year to do so. Of those 88%, Over half had worked with suppliers on increasing supply chain data. Other categories that we see, internal communication and data systems. As you know, if you respond to the KPIs, that you often have to touch upon many different departments in the organization to collect the right data. And so we're seeing that organizations are working on those internal systems to be able to aggregate the data in a single place and respond to the KPIs. But look at those numbers for change processes and change product or packaging. Wow, that is really quite impressive. I mean, we have 30% of the respondents saying, yes, we actually changed the way we're doing manufacturing. And a slightly smaller percentage that said, yes, we made changes to our product or our packaging in order to get a better KPI score, and of course, to improve the sustainability, the real bottom line, sustainability of our operations and products. This histogram, which is probably familiar, represents the data at a KPI level. It is still true that the most common response to a given KPI is cannot determine at this time, unable to determine. But if you look at those three bars representing 2015, 16, and 17, you will see that the number of zeros or unable to determine has gone down, and the number of 100%, 90 to 100%, which represent kind of full visibility into performance, have gone up. So again, this is indicative of the overall scores going up. We see that we are budging, companies are being budged off of that bottom line of unable to determine and making that transition towards transparency and visibility. We've just begun to look at some of the detailed KPIs in different sectors. Here is an example where we see the response to the KPI regarding supply chain GHG. Again, noting that these scores reflect the percent of suppliers that are measuring and reporting greenhouse gas emissions. And we broke this data in clothing, footwear, and textile into the selling departments. So not the categories, right? The categories are all textile categories, but the departments selling those textiles into apparel, home, and then other, which are generally general merchandise, things like auto supplies, sporting goods, et cetera. And we see that over the 3 years in both apparel and home, that the answer to visibility around supply chain GHG reporting has increased significantly. For example, in apparel from 25 to 40%, and similarly increased for home. And so this is more detailed information that, in fact, around a specific issue in a specific industry sector, there's increased visibility. And of course, we know that the Ghg Index has gained momentum and gained adoption in the textile industry, and that's probably a large part of what we're seeing here. Now, the next graph has to be shown with a bit of a caveat. Right? So this is the actual numbers reported for GHG intensity by the manufacturers in the textile sector. The bar goes down, so that's good. The number being reported for carbon intensity is decreased from around 1,000 CO2 equivalents per ton of product to around 700 or so. And that is a statistically significant difference. Now, we also see that there are a number of outliers. We have some reported GHG numbers that appear to be maybe 1/1000th of what they should be, and others that maybe appear about 1,000 times larger than they should be. And we don't know, of course, whether companies have changed the scope of what they're reporting for scope 1 and 2, et cetera. But nevertheless, we have some at least gross indication that even the numbers around activities for GHG are decreasing. Finally, let me end on the value of engagement that Ewan touched upon. So this graph shows the average score for, first of all, those that only reported in 2017 for the first time, second, 2017 and 16, so they did not participate in 2015, and then finally the bar for those that have participated in the index all 3 years. And we see that those who have participated from the beginning indeed have a statistically significant higher score on average, 28% higher than those that just entered in 2017. So that's again evidence that those who are engaging over a period of time are developing systems and capabilities that allow them greater visibility into their own operations and their supply chain. So again, look for our impact report to be released on the web in increments. We'll kind of launch it here in probably about 4 to 8 weeks and come out with some of the initial findings, and then we'll have chapters over the rest of the fiscal year here representing deep dives into particular sectors and also stories that highlight how companies have indeed made changes to their operations and their supply chain visibility to get these higher scores.